3. How everything fits together. 10. The grand plan. Now that we have reviewed the elements of influences, feelings, emotions, social styles and needs, it's time to focus on more sophisticated subjects such as human perception, objective reality and the very fiber of space and time. As the previous chapters have attempted to help have better understand the people around us, the next 4 chapters, chapters 11 through 14, will explore the universe and our place in it. It is critical to human physiological well-being that we know that we are a part of something larger than ourselves, that we have a purpose in this world. The next 4 chapters set the stage for a better understanding of how everything fits together. 11. Human perception. Human perception, often called simply perception, has been misinterpreted by both professionals and novices alike. It has been applied to everything from a person's opinion to the very existence of the universe. Many times, it is used as a debating mechanism. Has anybody ever said to you, well, that is your perception? In some cases, it has become a medical diagnosis. Professionals have used it to describe a person's inability to understand or to grasp complicated concepts. Somehow our culture has popularized these notions in such a way that we find them in our books and movies. I believe it is the most misunderstood word today. Let us clear it up, once and for all. There are 2 types of perception, physical and emotional. Whereas physical perception describes an incredibly rich field of study where many people in industry and academia continue to explore the human senses, i.e., vision, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, emotional perception describes the little-known subject of how one's brains filter and relate information. 11.1 Perceptional illusions. While I have great respect for both these fields of research, we must be cautious not to merge them into a confusing hybrid. What is especially dangerous is how physical perception is being applied to other human capabilities, such as intelligence and memory. I am sure you have heard people make statements like, everything is in your mind, each person creates their own reality. I have to say this is crazy talk. Any effort to do so reduces the human consciousness to the abstract and renders us powerless to advance our awareness. In other words, applying emotional perception to the concept of physical reality reduces our world to an illusion. It is easy to conclude that as human beings, we cannot handle that. What a scary thought. If nothing we see, feel, hear, and touch is real, how can our minds relate? How can we be at peace with an ever-changing environment? To take it a step further, this means that Einstein's theory of relativity is meaningless, that an airplane does not fly and a boat does not float. If you take one thing out of this chapter, it is this: our brains process and store information based on what we know to be real. Stating that nothing is real creates a vicious circle in our minds that is infinite, thus it cannot be resolved. Without resolution, our minds enter a state of void and dissolution, which leads to unhappiness and inner turmoil. For these reasons, we plan to discuss physical and emotion perception separately in hopes you may do the same in your life. 11.2 Physical perception. In any discussion of the workings of world and the physical origin of things like rainbows, we must affirm that they are real and not just a construct developed in one's consciousness. Granted, vision is only a model of reality and is subject to unconscious social and biological forces, but it is very important to say that what is seen is real and tangible. Our best example is a traditional photograph. When a picture of a complex object, such as an airplane, is taken, the film imprints the negative image. Later the image is developed into a bright and vibrant color photo. When viewing the photo, wear a rivet on the fuselages, do you see them? Do you see every speck of dirt on the tires? Do you see every person sitting in a window seat? Of course not for reasons of perception, but for technical reasons. The camera's lens has a limited department of field. The film has a defined resolution. The paper has a known color absorption ratio. Similar physical limitations are true for digital cameras. Regardless of the camera type, the airplane is real. Like our brains, the camera saw the airplane and did its best to interpret its physical attributes. What we know about human senses is that they are body receptors, of which the mind creates the vision of an external world. These interpretations represent one's experiences in the physical reality. For example, wetness is a stimulus associated with the feeling of liquids. All the aspects of vision are similarly defined relationships. We imagine the external world from a stimulus on the retina. These relationships are multidimensional and cross all aspects of the human experience. For example, what are the characteristics of the color orange? Can one explain orange to anyone without referring to an orange object? While it is true that the biophysical processes contributed to the construction of the visual experience, it is also true that our brains learn through relationships of multidimensional models of the physical world. They are not an illusion, but an interpretation. The idea of interpretation of objects, otherwise known as the biophysical processes, is absolutely amazing. Imagine these electrochemical pulses traveling from neuron to neuron. The brain receives these pulses. Each pulse is nearly identical. A stronger stimulus, e.g., brighter light, makes the pulses come at a higher rate. The interpretation depends on where in the brain the pulses go. Visual pulses eventually get to various parts of the visual cortex. Objects imagined by consciousness have 4 seemingly independent characteristics, as listed below. Shape, the geometrical extent of the object in 3 dimensions of space. Location, the position of the object relative to the viewer and to other objects in 3 dimensions of space. Color and brightness, shading, texture, luminance, transparency, and other characteristics of the surface of the object. Motion, the variation of the orientation and location of the object as time progresses through 3 dimensions of space. Each of the above characteristics is processed in a different part of the visual cortex. It is easy to think of these characteristics, but it is hard to imagine separating them and analyzing them in different parts of the brain without reference to the object itself. The brain does this separation before it has developed a concept of an object. Now, we might ask, do objects have these characteristics precisely because they are analyzed in different regions of the brain, and consciousness constructs representations from these building blocks, or do they really have these characteristics and nature has found clever ways of teasing us? Well, most scientists favor the latter, since the abstract nature of the former does not hold water. The reasons why may become clearer to you in a later chapter where we discuss object-oriented reality. 11.3 The prism of our mind. I like to call emotional perception the prism of our mind, because it is our brain's information interpreter. Given that the human brain receives messages from the senses, it quickly tries to filter them out and/or relate them to something it already has stored. Many times, it fills in the gaps for us, if the message relates to something in the past. It is amazing how the brain works. It can associate anything from the past, the present, and even the future in what seems to be a random manner. Google, 6, is no match. The quickness and vastness of the information search is overwhelming. A great example is the first Native Americans who greeted Columbus in 1492 on the island of San Salvador. It is said that the 3 ships were anchored of the coast for 3 days before they were noticed by the natives on the beach. It took a chief to look out over the horizon and question, what is out there? The European tall ships were like nothing the natives had ever seen, their brains could not relate, so it filtered out rejected images of the ships. The ships were only discovered through an intellectual inquisition by the chief. Once the chief questioned the images the others could see, then as group they contrasted and compared. Japan is called the land of the rising sun, as early Chinese looked to the east and saw that the sun sometimes looked different. Now we can say that on clear days, they saw the outline of the Japanese coast and concluded it was part of the sun. Only after traveling east and discovering land could they distinguish between the land and the sun. Our brains are powerful but need relatable information in order to do its job. Only through knowledge can we discover. There is a large unknown section in the center of the brain that scientists are studying by observing autistic people who lack the ability to relate. Regretfully, scientists can only theorize that this is the place where information is disseminated and categorized. This leaves us with the Gestalt theory of perception for now. 11.4 Theory of perception. The Gestalt theory of perception first appeared in 1890 as a reaction to the atomism theory. Atomism examined parts of things with the idea that these parts could then be put back together to make wholes, like a puzzle. Atomist theorists believed the nature of things to be absolute and not dependent on context. Gestalt theorists, on the other hand, say the mind perceives wholes even when there are incomplete elements. Things are affected by where they are and by what surround them. That a thing is better described as more than the sum of its parts. Technically, it is a theory that states that emotional perception is a collection of physical, biological, psychological, or symbolic entities that creates a unified concept, configuration, or pattern, which is greater than the sum of its parts, truly the opposite of the atomism theory. An essay by Christian von Ehrenfels discussed this belief using a musical example. In a 12-note melody, one can play it in one key, say the key of C, then change it to another key, say the key of A flat. There might not be any notes the same in the two songs, yet a person listening to it knows that it is the same tune. Notes make the relationships between other notes that give us the same tune, in a different key. For our purposes, we want to emphasize that the Gestalt theory is a tool used primarily in psychological evaluation. A tool used to evaluate whether a mind is working correctly. Professionally, I've worked with the Gestalt theory in a completely different context, in computer graphic development. Many computer-based graphic rendering tools rely on Gestalt theory in their basic operation. Simply speaking, a computer graphics program will automatically fill in the blanks while rendering a picture or movie frame. If you ever watches a movie on a digital TV, you may occasionally notice small square boxes fill in before their eyes. That is the Gestalt theory in action. When a movie frame is incomplete or has bad data, computer algorithms automatically updates it with associated images from other parts of the frame or the same part from other frames. While I believe the Gestalt theory has great applications in many fields and certainly has value to society, what I caution against is apply the theory to physical reality. The reality does not equal context of brain. The two entities are distinctly different. 11.5 Perception in the real world. It seems to be a giant step, but it is one many people have taken, the merging of the Gestalt theory with the concept of illusion. Regretfully, many people in professional physiology, entertainment and scientific circles are preaching the notion that perception equals illusion and illusion equals reality. I am sure you have heard the phrase, "It's all in your head." The best example is when people say the world really does not exist, it is all a figment of your imagination. It is funny how that statement is most always associated with another stating, "We are all alone." You see, one falsehood relies on another. This notion is not only damaging to the message sender, but to everybody around him or her. To believe perception equals reality is to create an endless crevasse in your mind that could never be filled. One of the foundations of this book is that fulfillment equals happiness and peace. Any notion that creates uncertainty, or doubt, or emptiness leads to unhappiness and inner turmoil. I am not sure how and why human perception has been linked to illusion. I can only speculate that there are people in this world whom find comfort in the belief that nothing is real and one's entire world is made up. It is my belief that this concept has been propagated through all aspects of our culture in an effort to convince us it is validated and is of value. Personally, I see an invalidate correlation with no value. So, keep physical and emotional perception clarifications in mind while reading the remainder of this book. They are critical to understanding reality and most importantly how we fit into it. 12. An object-oriented world. Have you ever found the world around us overwhelming? Have you ever just thrown up your hands at the wealth of decisions that need to be made? In the modern world, there seems to be too many choices and too many things to consider when making selections. I once read that the principal problem for a Russian immigrant who came to this country during the Cold War years was choice. In Soviet Russia, shoppers had one choice for bread, white whole loaf. In the USA, the grocery stores has an entire aisle dedicated to bread with many choices by brand, price, type and packaging, not to mention standalone bakeries and gourmet bread shops. In the case of the Russian immigrant, she did not have too many choices. After all, what they were shopping for was bread. Their problem was too much variety of bread to consider when making their decision of which bread to take home. I am sure you have experienced this at one time or another, maybe not the grocery store, but maybe at the electronics store or the clothing store. Big purchases such as cars and houses are especially hard. The discussion in this chapter will help one navigate the world of choices and variety by providing a way to differentiate between an object and its characteristics. Our goal here is to assist in better understanding your choices in this world of objects, to help you quickly qualify and analyze complex situations. The concept of object-oriented was devised by computer software professionals in an attempt to break down business functions so that they can best design computer programs to solve complex problems. The idea behind object-oriented programming is that a computer program is composed of a collection of individual units, or objects, as opposed to a traditional view in which a program is a list of instructions. Each object is capable of receiving messages, processing data, and sending messages to other objects. Many of today's electronics were designed using this method, including Microsoft Windows, Apple's iPhone, etc. It is our goal to apply these techniques to everyday life to increase one's power to observe. Employ them at the mall, at home, and at work. The idea is, when choice becomes overwhelming, through improved observation, slow down the selection process and break down your variety into its core elements to make the best choice based on your needs. Try to categorize things as to their function and their attributes. As you may have guessed, function is defined as what the object is, while attributes describe how an object looks. Everything in the universe can be described in terms of objects, their functions and attributes. As illustrated below in Figure 4, we receive thousands of messages daily, inputs, and must process, analysis and decide, process, analysis, decide, the path forward based on them, outputs. Object-oriented reality is a thought process that may assist people in interpreting and analyzing messages in everyday life. So consider this concept as a tool in dealing with reality. Figure 4, Object-oriented process. As a software methodology, EPUB attempts to manage logical objects, i.e. software programs, in a similar fashion to the way we deal with physical objects. In order to accomplish this, software professionals first need to qualify and describe the attributes of physical objects. Here, we hope to help one better understand how to identify and deal with objects in your daily life. 12.1 Helicopters versus airplanes. The most popular example to illustrate object-oriented reality is comparing helicopters and airplanes. Both fly, so they are both part of the flying machine object class, but consider how they fly. The fixed-wing airplane uses a forward-moving horizontal motion to elevate, while the helicopter uses a vertical one. The physicals on how they achieve flight are very different, and yet they both achieve it. It is safe to say that airplanes and helicopters deserve their own object class and should evolve separately with similar functions and attributes. The theory of evolution can be viewed in the same way. Some dinosaurs and most birds have hollow bones. Many scientists agree that they belong to the same object class or species, that birds evolved from dinosaurs, but how and why the bones are hollow vary greatly. Birds' bones are hollow so the bird is lighter and allows it to fly. The dinosaurs' hollow bones were in their long neck to allow for flexibility, a very different function than flying. We are all tempted to judge object classes by their attributes, but it is wiser to judge them based on their overall function and purpose. It is the nature of science to look for common denominators and focus on just that, but object classification can't be in the details, but in the larger picture of needs for those common denominators. I can only hope as science evolves, these early classifications can be revised. 12.2 Real-life objects. In my professional experience, I have found object orientation reality a useful tool for analyzing situations and eliminating all outside influences. For this reason, I find it an important element of our personal armor. It is a way to reliably evaluate any situation in life, eliminating distractions. It can help focus on what is important and ignore what is not. When observing real-life objects or things, they are often described with words that indicate reliable features. Most physical objects have features such as shape, weight, color, and type of material. Associative features describe objects that are more complex. For example, people have associated features including date of birth, parents, name, and eye color. Eye color may be seen as a relation between the eyes as a functioning organ and their distinctive color, i.e. brown, blue, yellow, or green. After all, we all have eyes, yet people are distinguished by their eye color and shape. All objects from a person to a rock on Mars can be described by its physical and associated attributes. Understanding how to distinguish objects by their attributes is a critical element in pursuit of a filter-free observation. 12.3 Objects and instances. The first object-oriented concept in our discussion is objects and their instances. Simply put, human being is an object, sometimes called object group or class, and a specific person is an instance of that object group class. Meaning, a human standing upright with 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, etc. Describe the object grouping we call human beings. You and I are people. As a person, we are each an instance of the human being group, in other words, we are a member of the human family. We may also be members of other object groups, American, men, woman, etc. It may seem silly to qualify people in terms of objects and instances, but it is an important illustration for our discussion to show the differences because many of our perceptions is they are incorrectly based on objects rather than instances. For example, we judge a person by their skin color rather than their individuality. In this case, we are judging the object instead of the instance. In less technical words, we are judging a person instance by their race object. Civil rights is the classic example. Long ago it was concluded that people in different parts of the world were created differently, that they originated from a different place or root. The people in Africa are of one root, the people in Europe are another, and Asians still are another. It was further concluded that some roots, or as we now say, races, were better than others. This is the general origin of racial prejudice in our society. This is why people took slaves, this is why Europeans established unequal colonies, etc. In terms of object-oriented reality, this is invalid for two major reasons. First, it assumed that there are multiple races of humans, there can only be one. In addition, one object group can't describe another at the same level. If Africans are a race of their own, as colonists proposed, they are not part of human group. The truth is Europeans, Africans and Asians are all part of the human object group race. There is only one race of human beings. Second, it uses physical attributes and differences in culture to define people as a different type race of human object groups. It's possible to subdivide the human object group by attributes as shown below in solid blue, but I recommend against it as it serves no purpose. For example, are Africans and African Americans part of the same or a different race? They share some attributes, but after hundreds of years in American, they clearly have a different culture. Figure 5 Human Race Object Group. Granted, hindsight is 20/20, but today we can easily conclude that all humans are in the same object group regardless of their traditional background and family origin. We are all human beings. I believe the word race is truly the most derogatory word known to mankind and should be eliminated from our lexicon. Science tells us that one time there were Neanderthal that were similar to humans but not. The case can be made that Neanderthal were of a different object group, but I think they were just humans with different attributes. At this point, it doesn't matter. In the world today, there is one object group of intelligent upright walking instances that we call humans. As a lesson from our past, please judge people by the individual character, intentions and needs before generalizing by minor distinctions such as skin color and bone structure. When we observe objects, we make a distinction between relationships that represent intrinsic, definitional properties of an object versus relationships that describe contingent, incidental connections between them. We rank object as to what is definitional and what is incidental. For example, we may agree for the purposes of a loan application that a person's social security number is a defining unique attribute while who the person's parents are seems as an incidental relationship. At a family reunion, the reverse may be true. This example illustrates how an object's unique qualifier changes based on the relationships associated with a certain situation. The fact is our brains are very good and quick at evaluating objects and instances. Our goal is to help to be better equipped to recognize how and why our brain is evaluating the countless objects around us. Just keep in mind the basic understanding of what objects are as they relate to the things that are usually encountered in everyday life. Thus, an object can be your boyfriend, New York City, the Ferrari in the showroom, which is beyond your means, the Taj Mahal, etc. At the same time, objects can be non-tangible things such as a bank transaction, a newspaper story, a phone call, a rental car contract, a utility bill, an airline reservation, a bank account, etc. With this in mind, anytime one needs to make a major decision or evaluate a situation, quickly try to break it down based on its instance rather than its objective. By doing this, one can see through perceptions and view the reality of the moment. Only once the reality of the moment is available can one make a proper and unbiased decision of the instances over the object. Keep object-oriented reality in mind while reviewing the next chapter on reality. It is very useful in identifying what is real, perceived or imaginary. I like to think of object-oriented reality as a way to narrow choices when one gets overwhelmed. Many people may become overwhelmed when choosing without knowledge and make a bad choice. It is common for people to focus on making a choice rather than making the right choice. Bad choices may be stressful while they are being made and for a long time afterward. Bad life-changing choice may linger for years and may strain a relationship with a family member or close friend. The lesson here is twofold. First, learn how to make good choices based on the instance rather than the object grouping. Second, when one feels stress while making a choice, first search for as many object attributes as possible. If there are none suitable, don't make the choice, rather get more information. Unless it is life or death, no choice is better than a bad one. Making good choices should always be non-stressful. The feeling of stress is a good indicator of a bad choice. 13. Physical reality. Alluded to earlier in the chapters on human perception and object-oriented world, physical reality is a major field of study. Dramatically launched forward in the early 20th century by Einstein's general theory of relativity, today it is beaming with new discoveries and passionate debate. In this chapter, we will discuss the theories associated with physical reality in terms of personal judgments and the very direction of life. Our goal is to explore how our lives interrelate with others and the world as a whole. Our method is to explore and understand our very existence. How we may cope with it and the realization that there are not 6.5 billion stories being played out in this world but one complex plan being revealed. Before we get started, we must put some building blocks in place. We need to explain some of the basic scientific theories and some decision-making paradigms. Once the stage is set, I hope you will enjoy your journey towards understanding how life's decisions interrelate. 13.1 The fabric of time. As we step further into the details, let us talk about an important element, the fabric of time. It is the tapestry of physical reality. Its threads are woven into everything we do and see. The patterns of reality weave together through history in a dynamic universal pattern of the cycles of existence. It is ever-changing and ever-expanding. As metaphors for creation, we weave a web, a patchwork of reality that creates from one source. We weave patterns through grids that create reality. Figure 6 The fabric of time. This concept was first introduced by Einstein's general theory of relativity, published in 1916. It is the idea that the fabric of time is the map to our very existence. It was created through the expansion of space over time. It is important to understand how space and time defines our purpose in this life. It is an essential part of our journey towards happiness and peace. It is an idea that is long forgotten, so as a result we've become a people will drift through our lives with no direction or sense of accomplishment. 13.2 To be or not to be. To be or not to be, after all these years it is still the question. Einstein's general theory of relativity truly opened the door for people to study our very existence. The theory fundamentally says that what is true for small things is true for large things and vice versa. This allows scientists to studying the smallest subatomic objects known to man, i.e. pions, photons, quarks, leptons, etc. With the understanding that what is learned may be applied to the universe as a whole. This notion spawned many fields of mathematical and scientific study including quantum mechanics. Briefly explained, the study of quantum mechanics expands Einstein's theory to include random variables, things that cannot be measured. The idea is that not all things are known, that some events are not planned so are truly random. The subsequent field of quantum physics set out to document a set of rules for how such things are defined. What is random and what is planned? Essentially, they classified events as either measured or not measured. The idea is if we are able to measure it, it is physically real. If it cannot be measured, it is not real. This is where the question we have all heard came from. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there to hear it, does it make a sound? Let me be the first to say, of course it does. Just because a human was not there to measure its rate of descent or its force as it hit the ground, does not mean that it did not happen. Sound waves are generated and many animals and insects most likely received the audio message as harmonic vibrations. Einstein summed it up when he said that, I like to think the moon is there regardless if somebody measures it or not. As you may guess, Einstein never liked quantum mechanics. Even though he virtually invented the quantum theory of light, the more he rolled the ideas of quantum mechanics around in his mind, the more he rejected the idea as incomplete or even workable at all. My favorite Einstein quote is, God does not play at dice with the universe. Quantum mechanics is a wonderful field of study warranting a great deal of further work in a number of disciplines. Who knows, the next great innovation may occur through one's knowledge of quantum mechanics. However, at this point, we must realize that it has yet to be proven. It is only a theory. The closest the scientific community has come is Dr. John S. Bell's inequality theorem, published in 1964 that works in absolute controlled cases. Einstein himself considered it a paradox. For reason unknown, many people in society have come to believe that quantum mechanics is more than a theory, that it is scientific fact. This belief is not only damaging to them, but to everybody around them. When people attempt to apply this theory to the human beings, it really opens up an assortment of problems. It challenges our very existence. Is the existence of people measured or non-measured? Are we part of a plan or are we random? Are we physically real or are we imagined? When Shakespeare wrote, "To be or not to be," that is the question. He was referring to suicide, but it is truly a metaphor for the issues facing us here. Many people in society believe that we are not planned, that we are imagined. I am not sure why so many find this idea comforting. I, myself, find it disturbing. As human beings, we lack the capacity to comprehend the question of our own existence. This is truly a paradox of intellectual capability. The responsibilities and stress is simply too much for the human brains to accept. For our purposes, we will maintain that quantum mechanics is a great theory that may be applied to as part of a general discussion of the universe. Like Einstein, I believe we exist until somebody proves otherwise. 13.3 Space and Time. The Big Bang Theory is the dominant scientific theory about the origin of the universe. According to the Big Bang, the universe was created sometime between 8 and 18 billion years ago from a cosmic explosion that hurled matter in all directions. The Earth came into existence sometime after that, estimates center around 4 billion years ago. 13.3.1 Big Bang Theory. In 1927, the Jesuit priest and mathematician, Father Georges Lemaitre was the first to propose that the universe began with the explosion of a primeval atom. His proposal came after observing the redshift glowing far edges on the stars in distant nebulas by astronomers. His theory was born when he applied his observations to a model of the universe based on the theory of relativity. Years later, Edwin Hubble found experimental evidence to help justify Lemaitre's theory. He found that distant galaxies in every direction are going away from each other with speeds proportional to their distance. Just like an explosion in nothingness would behave. The Big Bang was initially suggested because it explains why distant galaxies are traveling away from us at great speeds. The theory also predicts the existence of cosmic background radiation, the glow left over from the explosion itself. The Big Bang theory received its strongest confirmation when this radiation was discovered in 1964 by Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, who later won the Nobel Prize for their discovery. Although the Big Bang theory is widely accepted, it probably will never be proven, consequentially, leaving a number of tough, unanswered questions. However, based on Nobel Prize-winning evidence, here we will assume that it is true as we are basing our time and space model on this widely accepted theory. If it is proven not to be truly, well then the forthcoming ideas on space and time may also not be true. 13.3.2 Time and Space Model. This concept states that the universe is a creation made up of space over time. Consequently, all things exist within the constraint of both space and time. It is easier to envision space as a creation of the Big Bang theory, but time may prove more difficult. According to the Big Bang, the universe is ever expanding, like an explosion with nothing to stop it, and thus creating more space in all directions. At the beginning there was no space, now space seems endless. The same is true for time. At the beginning, there was no time, and as the universe expands, the future it's being laid out. Picture the universe as a giant balloon that is ever growing. It starts small, as air is pumped in, the balloon grows. During this time of pumping, the balloon expands its space. The time it takes to fill the balloon is time itself. Remember, the universe is still expanding, the universal balloon is still being filled, thus time is continuing to transpierce space. Looking at planet Earth may help us gain a better understanding of how time is a function of the universe. The length of our day, 24 hours, is defined by the length and speed of our planet's trip around the sun. We all measure our lives by this gauge. Our planet is revealed to us through its past time interval, or as we call it, history. The dinosaurs lived 65 million years ago. The last ice age was 10,000 years ago, etc. Time is our tool for measuring every activity from boiling water to space travel. Think of it this way, like everything else, the Earth is traveling through space away from the center of the Big Bang. It makes sense that the Earth must have been in a very different place 65 million years ago than it is today. Some scientists estimate that celestial objects are moving at a rate of 47,000 miles per minute away from the center of the universe. Can anybody imagine how far we have come? Sure, we can. We measure it with time. Time is the measurement of how far we have traveled since the beginning, since the bang of all bangs. It is one's roadmap of both the past and the future. Now the question is, if space and time is our roadmap for life, how do we navigate through it? Well, the course is plotted by choices. Technically speaking, our decisions, as a function of time, allow us to navigate through space. I understand, that is a heck of a statement, but think about it. When driving a car, we make left turns, right turns, or steer straight ahead. It is our choice to turn left, right, or do nothing. Granted, in this driving example, the paved road may be considered a constraint to our choices, but is it? When we are driving, we can certainly choose to ignore the paved road and crash into a building or drive off a bridge, but we understand through knowledge and experience that those choices are not good for us. This basic illustration of choice leads us to the next chapter, which explains how we choose and how we choose well. However, before we discuss choices, let us further explain how we travel through space and time. 13.4 Traversing space and time. Allow me to digress just a little. Thus far, we have described space and time as a three-dimensional plane expanding in all directions from its center. Many scientists have a different view. They believe that time is best described as a folded-up blanket where the past and future lay on each other like dirty laundry. Others take time out of the equation by suggesting that time exists in a fourth dimension. Well, based on the Big Bang Theory, we are holding fast with our description, but in order to satisfy the scientific community's concern, we offer this additional hypothesis. In understanding of space and time, we first suggest to separate its physical existence from its retrieval methods. For example, business computer networks store information in large databases. Typically, the database's records, segments of information, are arranged in the way they were loaded into the system. In the business, we call this the entry sequence. In other words, the information is stored in the sequence it occurs. Makes sense, right? Data is stored in a way like a file cabinet from front to back. When people need to access the information for business or other purposes, the technical team typically creates a separate path through the database that we call indexes. From a technical point of view, an index is a separate catalog containing logical access information plus a pointer to where the full information is physically stored. This is not unlike the book catalog at the local public library. Traditionally in libraries, there is a cabinet near the front desk containing cards with cross-references by author, type and subject matter. The card also contains specific information telling where the book is located in the library. Think of the library as a database and the cabinet as the index. With databases and libraries, there is always one physical order of things with many possible ways to locate items. Usually, indexes are arranged in a logical way for quick access using specific criteria. For example, in business, a sales database may be arranged by date, time, and location of the sale. However, for customer support purposes, there may be indexes or references to look up the sale by customer's account number, name, or address. In this case, the access method is different from the way the information is stored. The information is stored in its original place, but the indexes provide different ways to get to it. The same is true for time and space. The way space and time is laid out is separate from the way it is accessed and interpreted. In this scenario, space and time is still a three-dimensional plan expanding in all directions from its center, but it can be accessed using relationships crossing space and time. The past, present, and future may be arranged together using common elements or relationships. Recall our discussion in Chapter 11 regarding the human brain. How it stores and manipulates messages. The human brain relies on tangent-able relationships to store and retrieve information crossing time and space. In other words, a memory from 20 years ago may directly relate to a memory from 20 minutes ago. In our minds, both memories can be merged and associated quickly. I like to suggest that the brain has an untapped ability to relate the past, present, and even future possibilities. That, without us realizing it, the brain possesses the capability to access theoretically possible future events in the same way it accesses present and past events. It is my theory that premonitions and dreams are part of this facility. 13.5 How does this relate to us? All this technical and scientific theory has been presented in hopes to provide understand the very foundation of your existence. I imagine the idea that we are living on a rock circling a ball of fire that is being hurled through space at thousands of miles per second can be a scary thought for most of us. That would be true if we thought that all this random and unexplainable. Like Einstein, I do not believe that God plays at dice with the universe. I believe that the universe is being laid out with specific purpose and direction. As participants in this universal experience, we navigate through it using our experiences, relationships, and choices. What an exciting and amazing concept that we are active participants in such a mega construct as the universe, that our free will and choices dictate its direction and purpose. That is a team of individuals working together, the people of this world can change the course of universe. Awesome. 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 For me it is overwhelming, but overwhelming in a good way. The understanding that our lives are interconnected and dependent on each other in one complex plan being revealed helps me understand that I am not alone, I have a reason to be here, and that I am part of a celestial plan. 14. Decision making. It may be difficult, at first, to envision life's road map as a tree, but a tree and its branches is a great way to illustrate how each decision relates to each other, and how choices may build on one another. It is the goal of this chapter to show how a series of choices has and will dictate our life's direction. Here we will illustrate that choice, no matter how small or large, are truly complex and in fact are three-dimensional. For me, this is an important subject. I believe decision-making skills should be taught in schools. In the 1957, the Russians launched Sputnik, after which America shifted all its education resources to math and science. Now, with the space race and Cold War behind us, I propose we redistribute our educational efforts in a more holistic approach that will help people live higher quality and more productive lives. Developing decision-making skills is a large part of that. Like the previous chapter, this subject is an integral part of understanding physical reality. Similarly, we must first provide some technical background on the science of decision-making as a foundation. So, take a moment and review this chapter. If you have or have not pondered the essential parts of decision-making, this chapter may prove worthwhile. 14.1 Decision Tree. The science of decision-making was recently developed by mathematicians as part of their studies on game theory. Game theory attempts to qualify mathematically how games are played, their structures, strategies, and possibilities. As this is not a book on game theory, we will limit the discussion to one of game theory's simplest tools, the decision tree. Here we will illustrate how decision trees may be applied to your life's choices and how a better understanding of how decisions relate to each other may assist one in making future decisions. Figure 7 Decision Tree. As demonstrated in Figure 7, a decision tree is a branching tree-style diagram that outlines all of the possible choices a person can make. Decision trees are a common way of flowcharting interactive experiences. Creating a decision tree can be a powerful way of understanding the formal structure of any choice. It is in essence a way of mapping out possibilities. Game theory is typically applied to simple games, tic-tac-toe. Tic-tac-toe is a good example as its complete realm of possibility can in fact be diagrammed by hand. In a game, as in life, what one can do at any given moment depends on what has already happened. At the beginning of a game of chess, for example, one cannot move either of one of the rooks because they are both blocked by pawns. Later in the game, one might be able to move a rook if a pawn has been maneuvered out of the way. The complexity of game leads to a system of many possible actions. Available actions at a given moment is contingent on the current state of the piece on the game board. Because chess is a more complicated game to diagram as a decision tree, let's start with a simpler example, tic-tac-toe. 14.2 Tic-tac-toe. As illustrated below, in figures 8 and 9, tic-tac-toe starts with the first player, X, putting a mark in any of 9 cells. There are consequently 9 possible first moves. In our example, player X selected cell number 1. As mapped in figure 10.7, the 9 choices open to player X on the first move can be diagrammed as 9 decision triangles radiating down from the top. For simplicity, the triangles represent the move, as result of a decision, and the lines represent the selected choices, matching the example in figure 9. Next, it's player O's move. Now, there are only 8 cells still open, which 8 depending on where the X is, cell #1. In our example, player O selects cell number 10. That leaves 7 open cells for player X on his second move. Player X selects cell number 5, then player O selects cell number 2. As we continue the process, we will eventually diagram moves that put 3 markers in a row. It is a win for the player with the last move. Player X wins by placing his mark on cell number 6. At the end of the game, player X made 4 moves while player O made only 3. Figure 8 Tic-tac-toe grid. Figure 9 tic-tac-toe game. It's also the terminating move of that particular branch in the diagram, for the game ends when someone gets 3 in a row. Mark that point as a win, for X other branches of the diagram will terminate in a tie. Mark them as ties. Obviously, the game of tic-tac-toe cannot go on forever. 9 moves is the maximum. So eventually, we will have a completed diagram of the game. Figure 10 tic-tac-toe strategy. One may think we're making the game of tic-tac-toe way too complicated in this example, but the real illustration is not a game but how player X's moves affect player O's and vice versa. As in life, tic-tac-toe's choices reduce with each decision. In tic-tac-toe, all choices are known ahead of time and can be analyzed separately from each other. In a sense, each choice is a branch of a tree connected to its own extending branches. Now try to envision your life's roadmap. Reflect on the major decisions like your choice of schools, your relationships, or your career choices. Maybe consider the books you've read or the TV shows you have watched. Try to imagine them linked together. Next, try to envision how each choice has been built one on the other. After that, look forward to the future, try to predict what you will do next week, next year, or in 20 years. Imagine where you will be living in 10 years. Who will or will not be part of your life? I bet you can paint a fairly clear picture. It is an amazing feeling when realizing how it all works. 14.3 Decision-making techniques. Here are some additional techniques that may help make decisions where many factors are claiming your attention. We hope these techniques may help to make the best decisions possible with the information available. These tools may help map out the likely consequences of decisions, work out the importance of individual factors, and choose the best course of action to take. If we can learn to make timely and well-considered decisions, they can often lead to spectacular and well-deserved life successes. However, if we make poor decisions, we risk failure, unhappiness, and unnecessary burdens. 14.3.1 Pareto analysis. Pareto analysis is a very simple technique that helps one to choose the most effective changes to make. It's the idea that by doing 20% of works one can generate 80% of the advantage of doing the entire job. Pareto analysis is a formal technique for finding the changes that will give the biggest benefits. It is useful where many possible concurrent options are competing for your attention. To start using this tool, write out a list of the changes you could make. If you have a long list, group it into related changes. Then score the items or groups. The scoring method you use depends on the sort of problem you are trying to solve. The first change to tackle is the one that has the highest score. This one will give the biggest benefit. The options with the lowest scores will probably not even be worth bothering with, as the cost may be more than the solutions are worth. To use it, list the problems, or the available options. Group options where they are facets of the same larger problem. Apply an appropriate score to each group. Work on the group with the highest score. Pareto analysis not only shows the most important problem to solve, it also gives a score showing how severe the problem is. 14.3.2 Paired comparison analysis. Paired comparison analysis helps to work out the importance of a number of options relative to each other. It is particularly useful where there is no objective data to use as base. This makes it easy to choose the most important problem to solve, or select the solution that will give the greatest advantage. Paired comparison analysis helps to set priorities where there are conflicting demands on resources. It is also an ideal tool for comparing apples with oranges, completely different options such as whether to invest in 3 different areas, e.g., marketing, a new piece of software, or a new piece of machinery. These decisions are usually much harder than comparing 3 possible choices in one area. For example, use the technique to examine each option, one by one. For each comparison, one will decide which of the 2 options is most important, and then assign a score to show how much more important it is. Follow these steps to use the technique. List the options to compare. Assign a letter to each option. Mark the options as row and column headings on the worksheet. Note that the cells on the table where one will be comparing an option with itself have been blocked out. There will never be a difference in these cells. The cells on the table where one will be duplicating a comparison are also blocked out. Within the remaining cells, compare the option in the row with the one in the column. For each cell, decide which of the 2 options is more important. Write down the letter of the more important option in the cell, and score the difference in importance from 0, no difference, to 3, major difference. Finally, consolidate the results by adding up the total of all the values for each of the options. One may want to convert these values into a percentage of the total score. 14.3.3 Grid Analysis. Grid analysis, also known as decision matrix analysis, PU matrix analysis, or MOT multi-attribute utility theory, is a useful technique to use for making a decision. Decision matrices are most effective where one has a number of good alternatives and many factors to take into account. The first step is to list the options and then the factors that are important for making the decision. Lay the options out on the worksheet table, with options as the row labels, and factors as the column headings. Next, work out the relative importance of the factors in the decision. Show these as numbers. We will use these to weight your preferences by the importance of the factor. These values may be obvious. If they are not, then use a technique such as paired comparison analysis to estimate them. The next step is to work your way across your table, scoring each option for each of the important factors in your decision. Score each option from 0 poor to 3 very good. Note that one do not have to have a different score for each option. If none of them is good for a particular factor in your decision, then all options should score 0. Now multiply each of your scores by the values for your relative importance. This will give them the correct overall weight in your decision. Finally, add up these weighted scores for your options. The option that scores the highest wins. 14.3.4 Plus minus interesting. Plus minus interesting PMI is a valuable improvement to the weighing pros and cons technique used for centuries. The idea is before one moves straight to action on a course of action, it is important to check that it is going to improve your situation. It may actually be best to do nothing. PMI is a useful tool for doing this. On a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, write a column heading plus. Underneath it, write down all the positive results of taking the action. Next, underneath your list, write minus and write down all the negative effects. In the interesting column, write down the implications and possible outcomes of taking the action, whether positive, negative, or uncertain. By this stage, it may already be obvious whether one should implement the decision. If it is not, consider each of the points one have written down and assign a positive or negative score to it appropriately. The scores one assign may be quite subjective. Once completed, add up the score. A strongly positive score shows that an action should be taken, a strongly negative score that it should be avoided. PMI was codified by Edward de Bono in his book Serious Creativity. Key points are: PMI is a good way of weighing the pros, cons, and implications of a decision. When one has selected a course of action, PMI is a good technique to use to check that it is worth taking. 14.3.5 Force field analysis. Force field analysis is a useful technique for looking at all the forces for and against a decision. In effect, it is a specialized method of weighing pros and cons. By carrying out the analysis, one can plan to strengthen the forces supporting a decision, and reduce the impact of opposition to it. Force field analysis is a very involved tool and should be reserved for difficult decisions such as selecting a college, choosing a career, or a place to live. To carry out a force field analysis, first create a 3-column worksheet and then use it to follow these steps. Describe your plan or proposal for change in the middle column. List all forces for change in the left column, and all forces against change in the right column. Assign a score to each force, from 1 weak to 5 strong. Next, tallying the score of each column that maximum achievement. Time can be on your side with making time for success. Figure 11 pros and cons forces. Once one has carried out an analysis, one can decide whether your decision is viable. Where one has already decided to make this important choice, force field analysis can help one to work out how to improve its probability of success. Here are 2 choices: to reduce the strength of the forces opposing the choice, or to increase the forces pushing a choice. Often the most elegant solution is the first. Just trying to force change through may cause its own problems. People can be uncooperative if change is forced on them. If one had to implement a choice in the example above, the analysis might suggest a number of changes to the initial plan. Force field analysis is a useful technique for looking at all the forces for and against a plan. It helps one to weigh the importance of these factors and decide whether a plan is worth implementing. Where one has decided to carry out a plan, force field analysis helps one identify changes that could make it improve. 14.3.66 Thinking hats. Six thinking hats is a powerful technique. It is used to look at decisions from a number of important perspectives. This forces one to move outside habitual thinking style, and helps one to get a more rounded view of a situation. This tool was created by Edward de Bono in his book Six Thinking Hats. Many successful people think from a very rational, positive viewpoint. This is part of the reason that they are successful. Often, though, they may fail to look at a problem from an emotional, intuitive, creative or negative viewpoint. This can mean that they underestimate resistance to plans, fail to make creative leaps and do not make essential contingency plans. Similarly, pessimists may be excessively defensive, and people that are more emotional may fail to look at decisions calmly and rationally. If one looks at a problem with the Six Thinking Hats technique, then one will solve it using all approaches. Decisions and plans will mix ambition, skill in execution, public sensitivity, creativity and good contingency planning. One can use Six Thinking Hats in group discussions or on your own. In groups, it has the benefit of blocking the confrontations that happen when people with different thinking styles discuss the same problems. Each thinking hat is signified by a color, i.e., white, red, black, yellow, green, and blue, representing a different style of thinking. First, the white hat thinking focuses on data available. Look at the information one has, and see what can be learned from it. Look for gaps in your knowledge, and either try to fill them or take account of them. This is where one analyzes past trends, and tries to extrapolate from historical data. A red hat looks at problems using intuition, gut reaction, and emotion. Also, try to think how other people will react emotionally. Try to understand the responses of people who do not fully know your reasoning. Using a black hat thinking typically looks at all the bad points of the decision. Look at it cautiously and defensively. Try to see why it might not work. This is important because it highlights the weak points in a plan. It allows one to eliminate them, alter them, or prepare contingency plans to counter them. Black hat thinking helps to make your plans tougher and more resilient. It can also help one to spot fatal flaws and risks before embarking on a course of action. Black hat thinking is one of the real benefits of this technique, as many successful people get so used to thinking positively that often they cannot see problems in advance. This leaves them underprepared for difficulties. The yellow hat helps one to think positively. It is the optimistic viewpoint that helps one to see all the benefits of the decision and the value in it. Yellow hat thinking helps one to keep going when everything looks gloomy and difficult. The green hat stands for creativity. This is where one can develop creative solutions to a problem. It is a freewheeling way of thinking, in which there is little criticism of ideas. A whole range of creativity tools can help one here. The blue hat stands for process control. This is the hat worn by people chairing meetings. When running into difficulties because ideas are running dry, they may direct activity into green hat thinking. When contingency plans are needed, they will ask for black hat thinking, etc. A variant of this technique is to look at problems from the point of view of different professionals, e.g., doctors, architects, sales directors, etc. Or different customers. It is well worth reading Edward de Bono's book Six Thinking Hats for more information on this technique. Six Thinking Hats is a good technique for looking at the effects of a decision from a number of different points of view. It allows necessary emotion and skepticism to be brought into what would otherwise be purely rational decisions. It opens up the opportunity for creativity within decision making. The technique also helps, for example, persistently pessimistic people to be positive and creative. 14.3.7 Cost-Benefit Analysis. One may have been intensely creative in generating solutions to a problem, and rigorous in your selection of the best available. This solution may still not be worth implementing, as it may have a large lot of time and amount money in solving a problem that is not worth the effort. Cost-benefit analysis, or CBA, is a relatively simple and widely used technique for deciding whether to make a change. As its name suggests, to use the technique, simply add up the value of the benefits of a course of action, and subtract the costs associated with it. Costs are either one-off, or may be ongoing. Benefits are most often received over time. One builds this effect of time into analysis by calculating a payback period it takes for the benefits of a change to repay its costs in time. Many companies look for payback over a specified period, e.g., 1 year, 3 years. In its simple form, cost-benefit analysis is carried out using only financial costs and financial benefits. For example, a simple cost-benefit analysis of a road project would measure the cost of building the road, and subtract this from the economic benefit of improving transport links. It would not measure either the cost of environmental damage or the benefit of quicker and easier travel times to work. A more sophisticated approach to cost-benefit measurement models is to try to put a financial value on intangible costs and benefits. The version of cost-benefit analysis we explain here is not necessarily simple. Where large sums of money are involved, evaluation can become an extremely complex and sophisticated art. Now you may ask, how does all these decisions-making techniques and tools relate to anything else in this book? Well, the basic answer is choices are important. My advice is to live your life by making the best decisions possible using the best tools and information available. After all, your life is just a series of choices. 14.4 Theory of Three-Dimensional Time 8. When combining the space and time model with the decision-making concepts discussed in the last chapter, we introduce a new theory, the theory of three-dimensional time. This theory reaffirms our notion that decisions allow us to travel through space and time, taking detours when we need to and travel unknown paths when we are lost. It describes one's past while setting the stage for one's future. For illustration purposes, in Chapter 14, we describe two-dimensional decision trees. Conversely, life is a three-dimensional tree with choices and branches beyond our comprehension. The theory of three-dimensional time states that our decisions dictate our path through space and time, that the paths of all people are intertwined and dependent on each other, that as a community, we are each responsible for a shared past and future. From a scientific point of view, the theory of three-dimensional time is far from proven, but it is very intriguing. As odd as it may seem, the unification of the general theory of relativity and quantum mechanics is on the horizon. The merging of ideas that all things are predefined and that some things are random is truly an explosive concept. Three-dimensional time may be the missing link. If space and time are predefined, and our ability to choose is our navigation through it, then all things may be possible. 14.5 Life's Choices. In life, one's choices are not so simple. For a moment, try to envision our life choices structured in the same way as a game. Look again at the tic-tac-toe decision tree, illustration in Figure 7. If a simple game has as many as 9 choices for its first move, imagine how large one person's life's decision tree is at any given moment. In addition, remember the discussion on space and time. At any time, one's decisions navigate one's movement through space. As in the car driving example, one's choices direct one's travel, whom one meets, and dictates one's quality of life. I do not want to scare you, but imagine the decision path created by your life so far and the tree yet to be traversed in your future. I am happy to say that my life's roadmap does not scare me. The understanding that we are all closely integrated with all things and all people that are living today, that have lived before, and yet to come reassures me that I have a purpose. This concept is the essences of this book, that we are all connected and traveling the same journey, but at the same time we all have the ability to choose. We all have free will. Personally, I find the concept exhilarating. The fact that there is a single plan for all of us is nothing to be afraid of, it is something to cherish. More importantly, it is something to gain personal understanding about. The purpose of this book is to set the foundation for gaining personal awareness of each of our roles in this complicated drama being played out over the ages. We are here for a reason, we are important and germane to the journey. 6. Google is an internet search engine founded by Larry Page.